the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, you're watching and listening to Andrew Pearce here on GB News until 2 p.m. Here's what's coming up. As Keir Starmer surges in the opinion polls, are Labour really becoming a credible alternative to the Conservative Party? I'm going to be talking to a senior shadow cabinet member in the studio about whether he's now already preparing for government. And Harry and Meghan's much-touted Netflix documentary, wasn't it ghastly? We'll be discussing the right royal fallout. Then as England prepares to take on France tomorrow, that's in the World Cup apparently, we'll be talking to England star Jude Bellingham's former coach. And joining me for the next hour will be the broadcaster and former Fleet Street editor, Dawn Neeson. And you at home, of course, you're an important part of this show. Email me at gbviews@gbnews.uk and I'll put your points of view to those I speak to. I may even get to speak to some of you on air. That's what's coming up first, but here, the latest headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 12. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor's announced plans to overhaul the British financial sector by pledging to review, repeal and replace hundreds of pages of EU regulations. Dubbed the Edinburgh Reforms, Jeremy Hunt says Brexit has provided a golden opportunity to reshape the rules. More than 30 regulatory changes have been unveiled, including reversing some measures introduced following the 2008 financial crash. The government hopes the plans will help end the UK's sluggish record on growth. The Prime Minister says the reforms will keep the UK competitive.
There are actually 1 million people employed in financial services, and they're not just in London and the city. They're spread across the country in Edinburgh, in Belfast, in Leeds, in Bournemouth. And we want to make sure that we can continue creating jobs across the United Kingdom. Today's reforms will mean that the industry remains competitive. We can create more jobs. But of course, this will always be a safe place where consumers will be protected.
Rishi Sunak there, speaking at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire for the launch of a new generation fighter jet. Britain will work with Italy and Japan to develop the Tempest. It's designed to replace the Typhoon and is expected to take to the skies by 2035. The Prime Minister says the partnership will ensure the UK and its allies are outpacing and outmanoeuvring those who seek to do us harm. Postal workers at Royal Mail have begun a wave of strikes in the run-up to Christmas. Thousands are expected to attend a rally in Westminster later in an ongoing row over pay and conditions. Members of the Communication Workers Union will walk out again on Sunday, with further action planned throughout the month, including on Christmas Eve. Royal Mail warns the action will affect deliveries across the UK. Customers are being advised to post Christmas mail earlier than usual this year. Well, meanwhile, thousands of soldiers are preparing to cover for other workers striking this Christmas period. Troops are already in training at British ports and airports. Border Force staff at Gatwick, Heathrow, Manchester, Birmingham and Cardiff airports will strike for 8 days from December the 23rd through to New Year's Eve. Travellers hoping to head abroad over the Christmas period have been told to think carefully about their plans. Basketball star Brittany Griner has landed back in the United States after a prisoner swap with Russia. She was jailed for carrying cannabis oil at a Moscow airport back in February. Ms. Griner was released in an exchange for Russian arms dealer Viktor Bout yesterday. A serving Met police officer has been charged with 2 counts of rape. PC Rupert Edwards is alleged to have carried out the offences in Lambeth and Surrey earlier this year whilst off duty. He was first arrested back in September and suspended from duty. He's due to appear at Westminster Magistrates Court later today. A fuel poverty charity is warning the rising cost of living and cold weather will leave millions struggling this winter. National Energy Action says people are facing a choice of either accruing huge debt or living in unheated homes. It comes as the UK Health Security Agency issues a level 3 cold weather alert for England, with the Met Office warning of snow and ice in parts of the UK. And that as the average cost of renting a property is up by £117 a month on last year. That's according to Zoopla. The property website's reporting a typical month's rent is at almost £1,100. That's roughly 35% of the average income of a single earner. London, Manchester and Glasgow have all seen particularly sharp increases in the last year. Over 300,000 people have been affected by delays in processing passport applications this year. The National Audit Office says the delays were caused by an increased demand from customers after coronavirus travel restrictions were lifted. It's urged the Home Office to prepare for similar levels next year, with up to 10 million applications expected. And a Tory MP is planning to propose a law that could strip the Duke and Duchess of Sussex of their royal titles. Isle of Wight MP and Government Minister Bob Seeley claims there's a political issue with Prince Harry's comments after he quit as a senior royal 2 years ago. It comes as the first 3 episodes of their controversial new Netflix documentary released yesterday, in which Prince Harry accused the royal family of having a huge level of unconscious bias. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Andrew.
Well, welcome back. Let's go back in time a little bit to when Harold Wilson was Prime Minister. He was the only post-war leader after 1951 to serve as Britain's Prime Minister. He won 4 different elections. He spent nearly 8 years in number 10. The Shadow International Trade Secretary, Nick Thomas-Symonds, has written an award-winning book about him called Harold Wilson, the Winner. And I'm delighted to say he's in the studio. Nick Thomas-Symonds, extraordinary that only 2 elected Labour leaders won general elections post-1951. Why did you pick such bad leaders?
Well, I think that's a question that every Labour historian has been asking. I don't think they were necessarily bad leaders, and we had leaders of the opposition who did wonderful jobs for us, paving the way for other leaders like Harold Wilson to win. And of course, in Harold's case, the previous leader, Hugh Gateskill, had an untimely death, as did, of course, John Smith in the 1990s. But there is a fundamental question as to why it is, since 1951, only 2 Labour leaders have actually won general elections. And, of course, that's one of the reasons why Harold Wilson fascinates me.
And we've now got Sir Keir Starmer, Labour comfortably ahead in the polls. I would argue nothing to do with the great leadership skills of Keir Starmer. Haven't seen many of those. It's more to do with the Tories shooting themselves in the foot. Is Keir Starmer a Harold Wilson? Is he a Tony Blair who won 3 general elections? Or is he going to be one of the many Labour leaders who never won a general election?
I think he is going to be one of Labour's winners, but of course he's neither Harold Wilson nor Tony Blair. He is Keir Starmer. I do think that with any general election, of course, people get fed up with the government in office, and my goodness, there's a lot of reasons to be fed up with the government in office at the moment. I doubt we could name one public service, for example, that's in a better state in 2022 than it was in 2010. But it is also about people feeling able to give their vote to the Labour Party. We suffered our first, almost catastrophic defeat since 1935, back in December 2019. And to have got from there to where we are now as contenders for government, I do think is a sign of Keir Starmer's strength of leadership.
But isn't it, again, as I say, because the Tories have been so hopeless, we're on our 3rd Conservative Prime Minister in a year?
But governments in office do tend to enter a death spiral. That happened, of course, with Harold Wilson in 1964, where, of course, we'd had Macmillan. Macmillan then falls for Douglas Hume. We can all remember in the 1990s the way that John Major's government just started to have this sense of decay about it. So that always happens when governments have been in power a long time, and that starts to happen. But as I say, people also have to feel, Andrew, comfortable in giving their vote to the opposition party. We have that poll lead, but let me say this, there is no complacency whatsoever on the Labour side. We know we have to continue to build trust with the public.
Strikes galore. Nurses are going on strike. They've put in a demand for a 19.6% pay rise. They've been offered £1,400 as a result of an independent pay review body. Would Labour pay a 19% pay rise for nurses?
Well, what has to happen here is there has to be a negotiation in which neither side is going to get what they want to start with. I was a barrister and a mediator. I've appeared for parties in negotiations. I've actually mediated negotiations. And what my experience is, neither side ends up with what they wanted at the outset. But what you have to do is to sit down and do that unglamorous work of getting people to a compromised position. Neither side will end up with something they wholly want, but you can find a workable solution.
The Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has told The Times today that a Labour government has to talk about higher pay rises for NHS staff. Is he right?
I think what Wes is saying there, which is absolutely correct, is that both sides need to move. That has to happen to find a compromise solution. In the case here, we've had health secretaries previously who wouldn't even meet the Royal College of Nurses. And the government has either been doing that, sitting on the sidelines, pretending it's nothing to do with them, or in some cases, aggressively making the situation worse. What they need to do now is engage, find that common ground, and where there are strikes happening, try to put an end to them, but where there are strikes that are planned, to try to stop them from happening.
I'm talking to the leader of the Communication Workers Union later about the postal strike. Posties are on strike. Are they not turkeys voting for Christmas, Nick Thomas-Symonds? It's Christmas. People, this is the biggest time of year to post your letters, your Christmas cards. People will just get out the habit of using the Royal Mail.
There are huge risks here on both sides of the equation. There are risks, of course, for those on, for example, those on strike themselves or those who are proposing to strike. I mean, my father was on strike for 13 weeks in the steel strike, and I know that the sacrifices that entails for families. There is a particular risk on the other side as well, if the Royal Mail are not able to fulfil their obligations over Christmas. And there's risk as well for the government when it is so obvious the public services are not working. So when the stakes are this high, there's an even greater imperative to get around a table and find a solution.
Your colleague Angela Rayner, the Deputy Leader, said Mick Lynch, the leader of the RMT, is a good guy and he's doing a good job. Do you agree?
Well, he's certainly doing a very good job standing up for his members. And I don't know if you've interviewed him yet, Andrew, you may have done, but he's been on the media putting the case in a very articulate way. But whether it is Mick Lynch, whether it is...
He's Grinch. He's closing down Christmas.
Well, we have to...
Do you agree with that?
I don't want to see the strikes happening over Christmas. Of course I don't.
Well, tell him to call them off.
So, well, also, let's tell the government to get around the table and find a solution. We've seen that the latest offer that's been made over a couple of years has been rejected. Both sides need to move further to do that.
Before I bring in Dawn Neeson, just on Keir Starmer, can I ask a question about Harold Wilson? It's always been reported he was the Queen's favourite Prime Minister. She had 14. Was that what he thought, or was that what she thought? Because I know she went to his retirement dinner, and she went to Churchill's retirement dinner, no other PMs.
That's right. We'll never know exactly, and that's how it should be, because Her late Majesty the Queen was the soul of discretion always. But there are some little pointers as to her favouritism for Harold. As you say, Andrew, the retirement dinner where she went around to number 10 and had that wonderful photograph, Harold and Mary Wilson, late Queen and the late Duke of Edinburgh. But also things like he was the one Prime Minister who had more than one audience a week. So he'd have the weekly audience and then go back on a Friday before he went to Chequers. And all the evidence suggests that what Her late Majesty liked about that was the fact that he didn't just turn up to tell her what was happening. He often asked for her wisdom and advice as to what he wanted to do the following week. He also stuck to his guns, by the way, over holding the investiture for our now King, the then Prince of Wales in 1969.
At Carnarvon Castle.
At Carnarvon Castle, indeed, which also Her late Majesty was definitely grateful for.
Don't go away. Dawn Neeson,
it's not going anywhere.
No, so Keir Starmer, they're way ahead in the polls. It looks like it's theirs to lose. Do you see him as a Tony Blair figure? I think he's boring.
He's a barrister. Barristers are forensic, I believe is the word that you use in the legal phrase for boring. The problem I think a lot of people listening and watching today have with Keir Starmer is, up until quite recently, we didn't really know what his opinions were. It's almost become a cliche that he sits on the fence. I mean, it's very easy when you're in opposition to go, yes, but I would have done A, B and C, and I've done it, you know, with the lockdowns, for example. You know, I would have done it faster, I would have done it longer, I would have done it harder. Like some bad porn star, really, isn't it? isn't it? But, I mean, it's like... so. But recently, he has, I think, is sensing a weakness here with the Tories. I mean, it's not difficult to sense, is it? And he's saying the things that, in particular, the Red Wall voters, I think, want to hear about. We won't have open borders. We need more homegrown NHS staff rather than relying on foreign workers, which all of it makes sense to most people. The one thing I wanted to ask you, Nick, just listening to you just now, is, you know, with all the strikes going on, I mean, we are all horribly inconvenienced. How does Labour get round the fact that you are so heavily funded by the very unions that are calling the strikers out? Because they have you over a bit of a barrel as well. I mean, to the tune of what I think it's how many millions a year do they fund the Labour Party?
Millions.
So how do you get round that as a Labour Party, negotiating with people that are basically paying your wages?
Well, I'm very proud of the link between Labour and the trade unions, and I'm very proud that we have workers up and down the country who want to fund the Labour Party. But if I may say so, the assumption that seems to be based on is that, you know, workers want to go out on strike. The rank and file workers do not want to go on strike. As I was indicating in the earlier interview with Andrew, my own father in the steel strike was out for 13 weeks. It involves a huge sacrifice of people to go out on strike. They don't want to do
Nick,
that.
my dad was a FOC in a print union. I mean, I spent most of the 70s standing on picket lines with my dad. He was a very staunch Labour supporter, so I do understand that. But, I mean, if you go back to the RMT, I mean, Mick Grinch or Lynch, whatever you want to call him, you know, he was offered that, you know, the 8% over 2 years, 9% in some cases. He didn't even go back to the members and say, is this acceptable? He made that decision on his own, said, this is not acceptable, we are still striking, and then extended those strikes to cover Christmas, which he also promised he wouldn't do. So, I mean, why didn't he go and ask the members? I mean, you say, you know, strikers are suffering. They're losing money over this period of time as well.
Well, my understanding is that Mick Lynch was given an additional mandate by his executive council. But obviously, you'd have to ask him as to precisely what the mandate was and the unacceptability of what's been offered. I can't obviously speak to him.
There are some journalists, ironically, who won't talk to because we ask him these questions, by the way.
Well, and again, you know, you have to ask him. I mean, he does seem to appear on the media quite a bit, is my impression. But what I think that this discussion illustrates is nobody on either side of this, whether it's the workers who'll be making those sacrifices, whether it's in the travelling public that want to see these services, particularly over Christmas, that's why we absolutely have to find a solution.
We're going to have to leave it there. This is Nick Thomas-Simmons. He is the Shadow International Trade Secretary. His book, which has won countless awards and was the most talked about book at the Labour conference, is Harold Wilson, the winner. And he says that Keir Starmer's going to be a winner too. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for coming in. Now, Meghan and Harry, we can't get away from Meghan and Harry, can we? I thought the documentary was absolutely ghastly. 3 episodes released, with another 3 to be aired next week. The Sussexes addressed the royal race row, how they met on Instagram, yawn, as well as Harry's struggle with the UK tabloids, yawn. The documentary states at the beginning, Buckingham Palace were asked to comment. However, both Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace say no member of the family was approached for a comment on the Netflix documentary. Let's take a look at a clip from that film.
As far as a lot of the family were concerned, everything that she was being put through, they had been put through as well. So it was almost like a rite of passage. And some of the members of the family was like, right, but my wife had to go through that. So why should your girlfriend be treated any differently? Why should you get special treatment? Why should she be protected? And I said, the difference here is the race element.
Well, let's speak now to our royal reporter, Cameron Walker. You were there in that screening room, 3 hours. The press here, unsurprisingly, is pretty appalling for them. What was your take of what you saw and what is the real, true reaction in Buckingham Palace?
Well, from that particular clip there, for example, Prince Harry is making the suggestion that all female members of the royal family who marry into the family get exactly the same treatment from the press, and that Prince Harry is saying that Meghan deserves special treatments because of the race elements here, i.e. accusing the British press of having a racist agenda against Meghan.
And no evidence to sustain that at all.
No, exactly. And the other problem is, of course, there's two sides to every story.
Sure.
So we are only getting in this documentary Harry and Meghan's version of the truth.
Their truth, as
Their
they're called.
truth. Their truth. Now, Buckingham Palace, of course, was never going to comment, but I think the other problem for Netflix and Buckingham Palace yesterday was right at the start of episode 1, there was a disclaimer saying members of the royal family have been asked to comment but have not commented. Now, from my sources, Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace have said, no, we were never asked to comment whatsoever. There was some rogue email from a third-party production company, but when asked to verify that with Archwell, who is Harry and Meghan's production team, and Netflix themselves, the palaces, from my understanding, received no response. So clearly, they were not going to respond to somebody they didn't know.
There were many things that we could criticise, but I'm still gobsmacked, putting it bluntly, about the way she mocked the exaggerated curtsy she did when she first met the Queen. Why would anybody attack the memory of the Queen? It was 3 months to the day she died.
Yeah.
And Harry's face was a picture.
Yeah.
He was clearly unhappy. He probably tried to get that pulled, but clearly Netflix have complete control, and they included it.
Yeah, I think Harry seems very uncomfortable in that particular clip. I think Meghan, I don't think, would have had any malice in that. I think she was just not thinking, and it was a bit of an Americanisation of the gesture. But just think about, Andrew, if roles were reversed. If it was somebody mocking or mocking a gesture, a traditional gesture of a different country, they would be accused of racism.
Yes.
So why, I think many people are asking a question this morning, why is Meghan getting away with mocking the traditional gestures of the United Kingdom, especially when it's to do with curtsying in front of a Queen who has been dead now for 3 months?
He banged on and on about this race, the so-called racism that his wife experienced. There was no evidence. He brought forward no evidence in the 3 hours I saw. What evidence has he got that there was racism towards his wife?
Well, I think we need to remember the fact that Prince Harry is still clearly very traumatised by the death of his mother, Princess Diana, who was hounded by the press and paparazzi back in the day. But rules have changed since then.
Yes, dramatically.
But I think because he's still got that trauma, and I think he's got people speaking to him, having now living in California and getting the American PR perspective on this matter, perhaps he genuinely feels there has been a race problem when it comes to his wife, Meghan, and he's clearly going to stick up for his wife. But like you say, Andrew, it's very difficult to follow that argument when there hasn't been actual, genuine evidence for that argument.
Dawn Neeson, you were an editor of a red-top tabloid, and
yes.
we know the paparazzi pursued Princess Diana, who was an iconic world international figure. Meghan Markle has never, ever been subjected to the intense level of media scrutiny that Diana was.
No,
times have changed.
She hasn't, because times have changed enormously, and rightly so, Andrew. And I thought what's very interesting, I did sit and watch. I would rather not have watched it, but I thought for work, obviously, I had to. So I sat and watched all 3 hours last night, and it was very telling that the paparazzi shots they used of Meghan being stalked by a paparazzi on a motorbike and people sort of like hiding in basements and taking pictures, that was in America. That wasn't the British press doing that. And the headlines that were pulled up about sort of like, implying racism were from American publications.
Yeah.
So this having a go at racism in this country is profoundly wrong. And what you were both saying just now about sort of like, obviously, Harry is severely traumatised, and I did feel incredibly sorry for him watching that. I really did. I was very lucky enough to interview Diana back in the day and met the boys when they were little, and the love those two lads had for one another was so sweet, especially William looking after little Harry. And to see how the relationship has deteriorated now, it's horrible. I've really felt sad watching that.
Yeah.
But you were saying it's sort of like Harry is traumatised. Well, William is traumatised. Those two lads went through that together. They walked behind that coffin together. William was looking after his little brother the whole time, walking behind that coffin. So for Harry to then do this, and, there are lots and lots of digs about his brother in that, including the line that was picked up, I think, on the Metro, saying, royals don't marry for love. They all marry...
Only they did.
...compliant
Only
women.
Meghan and
Only
Harry
theirs
did.
is a fairy tale love story.
Yeah, outrageous.
And what an appalling thing to say about your own brother and father.
Yeah.
And how does he know as well? And I think the other point to do with that with Prince Harry and William is the fact fact they played some of the Panorama interview.
Yes.
Because, of course, Prince William put out that on-camera statement following the fact that we found out, following Dyson reports, that Diana was deceived into giving that interview, that interview should never, ever be aired again. And what happens? 20 seconds of it is played in a documentary fronted by his brother, Prince Harry.
Appalling. And, of course, next week we've got another 3 hours of it.
Another 3 hours. We only got as far as the wedding in the first 3 episodes, so this is going to be the fallout of Megxit, the Sandringham Summit, all of that stuff.
The wedding that this racist country hated. That's why we spent £32 million, and the streets were lined with white elderly people.
I was there.
As I said, white elderly people, honestly.
She knows how to hurt. Cameron, thank you so much for coming in. Now, coming up after the quick break, we'll be talking about the post-strike that started today with a mail-order business that's suffering in the run-up to Christmas. So see you in a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Royal Mail workers have begun their wave of Christmas strikes today. 115,000 have walked out. It'll impact deliveries across the UK. They've decided to strike because of pay and working conditions. They're due to strike on 5 more days in the run-up to Christmas, which also includes, can you believe this, Christmas Eve. Let's talk to GB News viewer William Sweet now. William, have we got you?
Yes, good afternoon, Andrew.
Hello, William. Now, which part of the country are you in?
I'm Cornwall. I want to say before we start, I like a lot of what you say and tweet about. And I watch Dawn and I watch Dan, so I'm a big GB News viewer.
Well, glad to hear it. Well, William, have you posted your Christmas cards already?
Oh, well, it's just talking about it at home this morning. I mean, if these sort of they're not careful, they're going to. Postal service is a great system, but if they're not careful, they'll end up doing themselves out of a job. I mean, we're in an age now where you can do emails or text someone Happy Christmas, or even an alternative carrier service. If you're not, it's a great system, but if you don't sort of, and I understand people want extra money, but we're in a difficult period now of trying to, where Royal Mail probably has to look at its own costs and work out what they can and can't do.
And, William, the Royal Mail, they put out an ad in all the national newspapers yesterday pointing out that already they were losing £1 million a day, so that's £365 million in a year, and that's even before the strikes. The strikes are going to really hit their finances even harder because, as you point out, Christmas, busiest time of the year. They're turkeys voting for Christmas, aren't they?
I know, I agree. And, well, yes, I think if you want to get, I think if you're going to do Christmas cards, it's better to get it in quick. But
yeah, have you sent me one?
I live at home, and I think my mum does a lot of it, the Christmas cards. But no, I think it's a lot of families or anyone that's. But yeah, maybe some people post late and they can't. If their card doesn't get there, it's sort of doing a disservice, really.
I agree. William, thank you for joining us. We have to leave you there, but that's William Sweet calling from Cornwall, GB News viewer. Dawn, have you sent your Christmas cards? I know a lot of people this year for the first time aren't doing Christmas cards.
I'm just actually writing one out now, and I thought William Sweet was very sweet, wasn't he?
Well, very nice.
To talk to him. But yeah, they are turkeys voting Christmas, and they're completely stuffed. And the last posting day is the 12th, which is Monday. I haven't sent a single card yet. Have you, Andrew?
I have, actually. I've been very organised.
Oh, well, I hate men that are organised for Christmas.
But a lot of people just won't bother. And I buy my cards from this lovely little shop where I live in North London. I've been going there for years, and they've had a terrible Christmas because people say they're not buying Christmas cards this year because of the strikes.
This is the knock-on effect with all of these strikes,
isn't
it? It's like the train strike. It's not just the train workers. It's all the businesses around the stations, the coffee shops, the hill bars, and the hospitality industry as well. People aren't travelling over this time of year because they can't get there, they can't get home, they can't drive, obviously.
There's a little Italian cafe I use just opposite the Home Office, and he tells me on the day of a strike, if it's a non-strike day, he sells 500 coffees. The day of a rail strike, 150.
See, this is the thing with...
And he has to lay off staff.
Absolutely. So, the union bosses, Mick Lynch, we're doing this for the working people. I'm not quite sure what working people actually means, but you're actually making a lot of people lose their jobs.
Absolutely. Coming up, we're going to be talking to the England player Jude Bellingham's former tutor to discuss the quarter-final clash with France tomorrow. Come on, England. But first, it's your news update.
12:32, I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Chancellor has announced plans to overhaul the British financial sector by pledging to review and replace hundreds of pages of EU regulations. Dubbed the Edinburgh Reforms, Jeremy Hunt says Brexit's provided a golden opportunity to reshape the rules. More than 30 regulatory changes have been unveiled, including reversing some measures introduced following the 2008 financial crash. The Prime Minister says the reforms will keep the UK competitive.
There are actually 1 million people employed in financial services, and they're not just in London and the city. They're spread across the country in Edinburgh, in Belfast, in Leeds, in Bournemouth. And we want to make sure that we can continue creating jobs across the United Kingdom. Today's reforms will mean that the industry remains competitive. We can create more jobs. But of course, this will always be a safe place where consumers will be protected.
Rishi Sunak there speaking at RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire for the launch of a new generation fighter jet. Britain will work with Italy and Japan to develop Tempest. It's designed to replace the Typhoon jet and is expected to take to the skies by 2035. The Prime Minister says the joint venture aims to create thousands of UK jobs and strengthen security ties. Postal workers at Royal Mail have begun a wave of strikes in the run-up to Christmas in an ongoing row over pay and conditions. Thousands are expected to attend this afternoon's rally in Westminster. Members of the Communication Workers Union will walk out again on Sunday with further action planned throughout the month, including on Christmas Eve. Royal Mail warns the action will affect deliveries across the UK. Meanwhile, thousands of soldiers are preparing to cover for other workers striking this Christmas period. Troops are already in training at British ports and airports. Border Force staff at Gatwick, Heathrow and Manchester airports, among others, will strike for 8 days from December the 23rd through to New Year's Eve. Travellers hoping to head abroad over the Christmas period have been told to reconsider their plans. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. And we'll be back in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now, even me, who knows nothing about football, I could tell you what I know about football. I could write on the back of a postage stamp that had been shrunk. But even I'm getting excited about the fact we're playing France, the old enemy, in the quarter-finals on Saturday. Now, Raheem Sterling is returning to the World Cup after leaving due to a break-in at his home in Surrey. England are going to need all of the firepower when they come up against the strong French team, who are the reigning world champions. Let's talk now to Jason Ramsey. Now, he was tutor at Loughborough College to Jude Bellingham, who's one of the great stars of the England team. Good afternoon to you.
Afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
A pleasure, Jason. How well is your boy doing?
He's doing so well. I mean, myself, everybody at Loughborough College, we're so proud of him, but we're not surprised he's doing so well. But yeah, we're all really proud of how well he's doing and what a superstar he is becoming.
And he seems to be, I mean, he's a very young man, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he's only 19. He started studying with us at 16. He's always had a great maturity about him. You see that across in his interviews that he's done and with the TV channels, radios. He come across like that when I tutored him in the classroom. So he's always had that great level of maturity and that humbleness about him. And he is older than his years suggesting. But to be 19 and to be doing so well, yeah, massive pat on the back for Jude. He's doing so well.
Could you see, Jason, star quality when you first met him?
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk about Jude from the age of 13 with his footballing ability. I mean, we got him through Loughborough College because we're the educational provider for Birmingham City at 16 when he signed his scholarship forms. So we already knew academically he was a bright boy, and he just sat and fitted right within the classroom, even though he was playing first team football at the time. His time management and the way to do everything and the way he's handled any responsibility was absolutely fantastic. And even when he went out to Germany to play for Dortmund, I mean, at Loughborough, we run a unique programme where we have what we call a distance learner. So no matter where that elite student is, wherever in the country or around the world, they can still study. So we fit around their timetable. And Jude continued that when he moved out to Germany and completed his BTEC, which was meant to be around 2 years, completed it by Christmas. So he'd done it in 18 months. So, yeah, he's always had that star quality about him.
And the pressure on him in the match tomorrow, Jason, the whole country is willing England on. Even people like me who don't do football are really excited and really praying that they're going to win. How well does he cope with that sort of pressure?
Again, going back, he's had pressure on him since he was younger, since he was 13, 14, so he's always dealt with it at different levels. Obviously now at 19 and starting every game, the pressure is on another level for him. But going back to his maturity levels again, his humbleness, he's got a great family behind him. I mean, even his younger brother's playing professional football now. So between the both of them, the family, they're all handling the pressure really well. And there is no danger that he'll go out and he'll thrive tomorrow night, regardless of the result. I think he'll do really well. But I actually think the team will do well tomorrow night.
Oh, I was going to ask you just finally, Jason, what's the score going to be?
Let's say 2-1 England. I genuinely think England could beat France. And they're as scared of us as we are as them. I think it's a really close game. But if I was a betting man, which I'm not, I'd put money on England to win.
Well, let's hope you're right. That's Jason Ramsey, who was tutor to our great star player Jude Bellingham at Loughborough. Now, let's return to news of the Royal Mail strike, which is getting underway today. 115,000 workers have walked out. It's going to have a huge impact on festive deliveries across the UK. Let's talk to Jen Fuller, who's the founder of Etta Loves, which is a mail-order baby sensory essentials company. They donate 100 of their sensory muslins each month to hospital wards, and their business is going to be seriously impacted over Christmas. Good afternoon to you. How bad is this for you?
Good afternoon. Yes, it's certainly a very challenging time, and it's having quite a far-reaching effect on businesses like mine, who are predominantly selling to customers online. It's meaning we are losing trading days in what's a really important quarter for many small businesses to generate cash flow to enable us to have a strong sort of following year. And I think the thing that hits really hard is how disappointing it is to be disappointing customers when their deliveries aren't showing up. Particularly for a company like mine, Etta Loves, we are delivering for new babies, which is a very emotional purchase. So we are potentially, disappointing grandparents or people who are trying to give colleagues a gift before they leave, or people attending baby showers. So there's that extra sort of emotional charge, I guess, on what we're trying to achieve and what we're unable to achieve as easily at the moment.
You can use other delivery services you can use instead of the Royal Mail.
Yes, absolutely. And we are offering those services. So sort of we've had to pivot and offer extra services. We've also taken a bit of a hit to upgrade the Royal Mail services we are offering to show full tracking to customers, because half the problem we're seeing is things are getting very much lost in the system. So we're unable to even accurately say to customers, where is your parcel? Because the things aren't being scanned in the way they would normally. So actually we are taking a bit of a hit as a business to offer a fully tracked service, so we can at least see and reassure customers that there's movement with their parcels if they have chosen to remain with the Royal Mail service.
Just finally, Jen, the point is, of course, some of the work you've normally given to the Royal Mail, you may never give back to them.
It's a hard one, isn't it? I do have sympathy with Royal Mail and the postmen and women. I think we need to see what happens as this conversation evolves between the union and Royal Mail, and see what the services they offer. Ultimately, as a small business, I need to make sure we're serving our customers and giving them the right options to get their delivery promptly. So it remains to be seen whether the Royal Mail can sort of pull that out the bag and continue to be a partner of ours.
Well, the best of luck to you, Jen, because they're not making your life easy, are they? That's Jen Fuller, who's the founder of Etta Loves, a mail-order baby sensory essentials company. Thanks for joining us. Now, in the House of Lords today, they're debating the UK asylum and refugee policy. Really? I didn't know there was one. In the past hour, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has condemned the government's asylum policy by saying the Rwanda scheme is immoral and that the processing delays are disgraceful. Well, let's get more on this from David Haig, who's an international human rights lawyer. David, they're debating the asylum and immigration system. It's a chaos and it's not working.
Well, absolutely. I mean, as I think you started it quite well when you commented what immigration policy. So at the moment going on in the House of Lords, the Archbishop of Canterbury proposed the motion to discuss the current system, whatever that system may be. And I think other people will be joining him soon. But there are some things that he said which I don't agree with, and some things which I do. For instance, he called it chronic dysfunction of the migrant system. That's something I think we can all agree with.
Can you explain, David, why so many people want to abandon France, which is a safe country, to come to Great Britain?
I think that's something, obviously, for each individual person that makes that crossing to comment on. I mean, obviously, we are an attractive country in terms of having a significant amount of available benefits for people that aren't available in other countries. But I think certainly what we can look at now is the fact that the complete chaos in terms of the migrant system and what we're doing in terms of the ever-changing Home Secretaries, the government and the laws, basically is effectively an illegal immigrant's dream, the way that we're looking at it, and a people smuggler's dream. Because if they can get here, they could stay here effectively indefinitely. We've already saw the Archbishop of Canterbury mention someone that's been stuck in the system for 14 years.
14 years? That's shameful.
Apparently, that's something that's been reported just now, that he apparently met somebody that's been stuck in the system for 14 years. So if that is correct, if you imagine that person receiving income from the UK government for that period of time, potentially housing, and if that's the case, there are others. I mean, it is quite common for migrants to be in the system for several years. That certainly is quite common. And that's one of the things that needs to be addressed in terms of, again, as the Archbishop of Canterbury quite rightly said, at the expense of the taxpayer, the long time it takes to process these asylum claims is costing the British taxpayer a lot of money. And that's something that should be able to be reduced significantly.
All right, that's David Haig, who's an international human rights lawyer. Dawn, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury making these outrageous statements about Rwanda in just the week after we had a census report showing fewer than half of us now identify as Christian. Shouldn't that be his job, sorting out his flock, rather than telling the government it's immoral, the Rwanda scheme?
Of course he should. I mean, they have got more important problems within their own backyard. And the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Church of England has spent millions recently, by the way, trying to convince us to go back to church, and we are still not doing so. It's an elderly congregation, congregation members are dying off and people just aren't going. So what he needs to be doing is getting back to his day job rather than trying to be a politician, and a bad one at that.
Indeed. Now, big story breaking in Scotland. The Scottish Parliament is set to pass a new law which is going to simplify the legal process for anyone who wants to change their gender in Scotland. It sparked controversy across Scotland, with one SNP minister resigning in protest. The British government in Westminster, however, now may refuse to recognise that law, which would be the Westminster Parliament asserting its authority over the Scottish Parliament. The new law in Scotland would shorten the time for anyone who might want to get a gender recognition certificate, and will also do away with the need for medical tests. Let's talk to GB News political reporter Olivia Utley now. Olivia, this is a battle between a devolved government, which says it's got the right to change the law about gender, people changing their gender, and the Westminster government saying they've got the right to intervene when they think safety is going to be impacted here, because also the Scottish government would allow people as young as 16, for God's sake, to apply to change their gender.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating law which has been now going through its final stage in the Scottish Parliament. I was up in Scotland a couple of weeks ago and I saw the committee stage of it. Essentially, what the law would do is remove all checks and balances for anyone who wants to change their gender. So if you're over 18, it would involve changing your legal sex, would involve living in your acquired gender for just 3 months.
Yeah.
And by living in your acquired gender, you just have to say that you have lived in that gender for 3 months, and then you can change your legal sex. If you're between 16 and 18, then it has to be 6 months. But again, there's no medicalisation, there's no diagnosis of gender dysphoria, for example, there's no therapy, there's no anything, all of which we have written into the law for changing your gender in England. So if this law went through, it would be a really seismic change. And now UK ministers are worried that although the government here has no intention of pushing ahead with anything similar, they're worried that women in England would be impacted by this law, because obviously you could have a problem where biological males in Scotland could change their legal sex within 3 months under this new law, come down to England and be legal women, and therefore stay in prisons, for example, for women only.
Changing rooms,
exactly. And obviously the government here has made a big point of keeping women's only spaces for biological women only. The other issue, of course, is that there could be a gender tourism problem. You could see English trans people going up to Scotland to have their legal sex changed, just staying there for 3 months and then coming down again in the new sex. So having issue like this different in England and Scotland has all sorts of problems which don't seem to have been thought through at all.
And it would be highly unusual for the Parliament in Westminster to overrule a devolved government, whether it's the Scottish Government, Northern Ireland Assembly or the Welsh Government, and it would pick a big fight with Nicola Sturgeon. But perhaps it's a fight Rishi Sunak would like to pick, because I suspect the majority of people in Scotland, certainly the majority of people I know, would be deeply disapproving of what the Scottish Government's proposing.
Well, yes, and I spoke to a lot of women in Scotland who are really worried about this law coming through, and lots of them are very left-wing by nature, but are sort of amazed that it seems to be the Conservatives that are standing up for this. So it might be a fight that the UK government's prepared to enter. Another sentiment which I kept hearing in Scotland was that there were people who felt that Nicola Sturgeon, there have been so many warnings about the poor drafting of this bill. This isn't the first time. The UK government's now stepping in, but the UN has raised questions about it already. So many questions about this bill. And there's a possibility that's being aired, that sort of Nicola Sturgeon is pushing ahead with it in order to create this big problem with the UK government, in order to create some sort of clash, so she can, it's just another sort of pedestal for independence. Who runs Scotland?
But on an issue like that,
an issue about democracy.
But I think in Scotland, on an issue like that, the Scottish people would be with the British government.
Would be with the British government. I think that seems quite likely too, which I think is why Nicola Sturgeon wants to get it through over the Christmas period when everything's a bit quieter, and hoping that'll just go away.
Dawn Neeson.
Everything Olivia's just said. I mean, I'm profoundly shocked that this has even a chance of going through. I think it's terrible. I think it's incredibly bad news for women. I think it's turning women's rights back decades. I mean, you know, we are told now as a woman, you can't talk about being a woman. You're transphobic even talking about being a woman. Sort of like you're almost committing a hate crime. No, being a woman is not a crime. actually. And being a woman and saying you are standing for women's rights does not make you transphobic either. And I think Nicola Sturgeon is, as you just said, Olivia, playing a very dangerous game because she's going to alienate 50% of the voters, surely. I mean, there can't be any
more than that,
women.
I would think.
Well, yeah, absolutely. But there's the female population of Scotland. I've got lots of friends who live in Scotland, and none of them agree with this.
I should just say that all that's happened so far is that Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, has written to Nicola Sturgeon laying out her concerns. So it hasn't yet got to the point of a legal battle or anything.
We know where she comes from on an issue like
we
this,
do.
Kemi Badenoch.
And as you say, it's one of the first times that this has happened. The Westminster government has even made moves to overrule.
Well, fascinating, and we'll keep you up to date on that. Now, it's Christmas, of course. There have been fears turkey may be off the menu for some Christmas diners because of shortages due to bird flu. The government's ordered all captive and poultry birds to be kept inside to help fight the disease. And the chief executive of the British Poultry Council recently told MPs half of free-range turkeys raised for Christmas have been culled or died due to the outbreak. Now, one turkey farmer in East Lancashire is worried many of his free-range turkeys will be unsold due to what he calls scaremongering about the shortage. And I'm joined by him now. Paul White is co-owner at Paul's Turkeys. Paul, do you think who is scaremongering about avian flu? Is it the government?
I don't think it's the government. I think it's I think supermarkets recognise that they will have less fresh turkey available, but don't want to lose those customers to people like us. So they're telling people, effectively, you need to go and buy a frozen turkey if you want a turkey this Christmas. They can get those as cheap imports on the continent. Very similar to the egg crisis that's recently been happening, where the supermarkets aren't willing to pay a fair price for eggs, so are telling people there's a shortage, and then they can buy in Italian eggs at a much cheaper price. And meanwhile, British farmers have got stacks of eggs left. It's down to the supermarkets not wanting to pay a fair price, and that's exactly what's happening with the turkey scenario. They have basically told people there's going to be a shortage of fresh turkey. They may be in supermarkets, but there certainly isn't out in independent suppliers like us. And it's not just me. Lots of my friends are saying the same thing, that they have got far more turkeys left than they usually would have. And that's because the scaremongering from the likes of the British Poultry Council and the larger supermarkets has driven people who would usually be our customers to buy a frozen turkey. And I can completely understand that. If I was walking around a supermarket and all I've had in my ear since August is you're going to struggle to get a turkey, and you see one there in the freezer, you're going to pick it up and put it in your freezer at home, because a bird in the hand, as they say, is worth two in the bush. Yeah. So, I can see why people have done it, but really it's the supermarkets just wanting to control the market again.
How do people find people like you, Paul? If people watching this programme would think, oh, great, because I really do want a free-range turkey. What do? Do they just put Google? Do they just Google free-range turkey suppliers?
Yeah, what I would suggest, most of us operate on websites and deliver across the UK and all that sort of stuff. So we're as advanced as sort of your supermarkets. And if you go on Google and type in the name of your county and free-range turkey, I'm fairly confident you'll find 5 or 10 people local to you that you can pick up a free-range turkey from.
How much nicer, in your view, is free-range turkey than frozen turkey?
I think they're worlds apart. A free-range turkey is traditionally reared over a longer period of time. It's a different breed. So often the frozen turkey is something called a white turkey, which is bred indoors and bred to grow fast, much more commercial. The taste is completely unrivaled, I think. So if you wanted something really special, it is, for most people in this country, the most important meal of the year, the most special meal of the year. Then it's worth going the whole hog and having the chance to support British farmers while you do it.
All right, well, look, good luck with that. That's Paul White from Paul's Turkey, so do Google him. And I'm with Paul. Just briefly, Dawn, free-range turkey or frozen turkey?
Oh, God, Paul's going to so hate me. I haven't eaten meat for 37 years now.
What about your hubby?
So, yeah, he'll eat anything. So
free range?
But he will, would much rather go to someone like Paul and get a free-range turkey.
Absolutely. Paul Turkeys, good luck to them coming up. So, now coming up, you're watching me, Andrew Pearce. Plenty more still to come on this programme. We'll be talking about Meghan and Harry, of course, and I'm going to be talking to the union boss behind that postal strike. But before that, we're going to take a little break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is